All right. Hello, fellow climateers, and welcome to another Power Lunch episode in the 1000 Conversations About the Future series. This is a project, again, of the Ithaca Green New Deal that aims to engage you in a conversation about the future of Ithaca. And as always, I am your lovely and charming host, Rebecca Evans, Sustainability Planner with the City of Ithaca. And also returning is the brilliant Lariah, who will be managing our YouTube chat. So if you have any questions or comments, we encourage you to interact with us via the chat function on YouTube, and Lariah will be sure that our speakers receive and respond to your questions. If there are questions that we are unable to answer, we will do our best to follow up after the fact. And today we're talking about one of the most comprehensive transformations that the city is going to need to tackle with the Ithaca Green New Deal, and that's transportation. So we're talking about decreasing single-use passenger vehicles, transitioning to electric single passenger vehicles, increasing access to public transportation, electrifying that public transit, increasing active mobility, and making EV chargers more widely available. So we definitely have our work cut out for us. But luckily, we have two experts with us today to talk about the ins and outs of transportation and of this absolutely massive project that we're going to try and take on. So first, we have Don Montanye, Environment Issue Leader with Cornell Cooperative Extension of Tompkins County and formerly the Way to Go Team Leader, also with CCE. We also have Matt Yarrow, Assistant General Manager at Tompkins County Area Transit, or TCAT as it's known locally. And between the two of them, we have a wealth of knowledge and expertise, thank God, that I know we can learn from. So without further delay, Don and Matt, welcome to the Power Lunch, and I will go ahead and hand it off directly to you guys.
Well, thanks so much, Rebecca. It's exciting to be here. I don't know if I've been live streamed before. So hello, everybody out there in the ethers. My understanding is that, we just start kind of an informal conversation here and folks can kind of chime in. So I was thinking maybe I should ask Dawn what she did last weekend.
Hey, Matt, how are you doing?
Doing well.
It's good to see you. We still are seeing each other on Zoom, but hopefully we'll get back together in person. Although now that spring and summer are coming up, we have more outdoor events happening, which is usually where we run into each other as we get out into the community more. So yeah, this weekend it was beautiful here, and interestingly enough, because we're having this conversation, we had an electric vehicle event, an outdoor event that Cooperative Extension of Tompkins County did with Energetics, and we also had collaboration with you, TCAT. There was an electric bus at the event with Bike Walk Tompkins, one of our local nonprofits that focuses on how to get more people biking and walking. We had some electric bikes there. Someone brought their electric scooter. And then we also had probably 10 community members who showed up with their electric vehicles, which was great. And these are folks who walk the talk, if you will, love their electric vehicles, love to talk to them. So they came down, they popped their hoods, and McGuire, our local car dealership, brought 2 electric vehicles, and Ithaca Car Share, another local nonprofit that you know of as well, brought 2 of their electric vehicles. And we had about over 100 people there. Wow. Coming out, walking around, talking to car owners, asking about the pluses and minuses, getting all their questions answered, getting on the TCAT bus, talking to the driver who was really excited to talk to folks about the electric buses that you guys have and want to hear more about what's going on there, how to load your bike onto the bus. And we had 12 or 15 people try out the electric bike. So it was a really great and fun event, and kind of gets us in the mode of really talking about what Rebecca introduced as far as really wanting to bring electrified multimodal transportation to a greater audience and in larger numbers to Ithaca, Tompkins County, in terms of that being our focus. So it was really fun and it was really great, and people were really excited about it and want us to do it again.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't make the event this weekend, but I happened to be going for a run on the Black Diamond Trail. So I looked down through the I guess the tree trunks because there really wasn't any foliage yet, and saw everybody congregating down there in Cass Park, and it looked like a lot of fun. Um, it's interesting. Um, I've always liked bikes ever since high school. I went to school here locally at LACS and kind of did their spring bike trip every year. And we went to, a variety of places like New Jersey, Canada, Vermont on our bikes. This was way before electric bikes, so this was real leg power. Um, but I've been curious about, electric bikes and kind of what their potential is. And I actually have purchased two of them in the last few years. And there's one of them that I enjoy riding around downtown in particular. Um, it just makes it easy for example, for me to get to work. I don't break a sweat. It's got nice fenders, so even if it's a little misty or rainy, I don't get wet. And I can even charge it at work. So basically, during the week, at least my commuting trips are basically, as close to zero emission as possible and basically free to me, since I already own the bike. So that's been a fun experience.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? And I really liked it when we had a line bike here, a dockless bike share, which unfortunately wasn't really able to survive COVID. And now we're, I think, on the cusp of getting a new bike share here in Ithaca, which will be mostly electric bikes. And I loved it because I would be at work, and where I would normally drive downtown to a meeting, I could just hop on one of those bikes. And then, you park it, you easily unlock it with your phone, then you could drive it, bike it downtown, park it, grab another bike to get back to the office. And it is fun. And I really love that. And a lot of people loved it. And you also had a lot of people who used it, out of necessity. It really gave people a transportation option if they didn't have a car or not able to drive. And I think there was a lot of usage out of it. And I know all of us in the transportation community here have been really trying hard to get a bike share back in town. So, and it looks like that's going to happen, which is
Yeah,
really exciting.
it's exciting news. And what's interesting is that it feels like electric bikes are a good solution for this area. I know a lot of cities have had, hundreds to even the thousands of like electric scooters dropped on the curb. And I've ridden electric scooters and they're fun, but I have to say, with the hills around here, with the number of potholes, it just didn't feel as safe. Like if you're coming down Buffalo Street and you hit a pothole with a dinky little wheel on the front of a scooter, that doesn't, I mean, you really have to know how to ride to keep yourself from getting hurt. So I think the electric bikes are kind of a sweet spot in that, they can help people maybe tackle some of the hills, but really they make travel times on the flats a lot less. And I know from our perspective over here at TCAT, we tend to look at it as very compatible with what we do. We generally move people greater distances. We move them up and down the hills, but on the flats, the routes, the fixed route network that we have doesn't necessarily serve all points. It doesn't connect all point A to point B that somebody may want to do throughout the day. And even if it did, to have the frequency of buses to really make that super convenient is an expensive thing to do. And so those bikes really kind of fill, I think, a niche that is important here locally.
Yeah, and I think if we're gonna, we talk about electric vehicles in terms of electric cars, which can be a great option, but of course, sustainability isn't going to be just changing every gas-powered vehicle, every gas-powered car into an electric car. We got to have many more people using shared transportation. And I know we talk a lot about how do we connect up these different forms of transportation. So you take a bus and then grab a bike and do the extra distance. We think about, different ways of providing the community in all of their forms, if it's a recumbent bike, and other ways that people can get around that's not jumping in their car. Let's do it.
Right. Absolutely. I think one of the things that I've heard from Ithaca residents, but definitely folks that live in the county but don't live in Ithaca proper, is that a lot of folks feel like traffic is an issue in Ithaca. Obviously during weekdays, during A and PM peak times, there's traffic maybe around the Commons in the West End, Route 13 corridor. And then on weekends, like, it's surprising sometimes, I'll go try to run some errands on a Saturday and just get stuck in what for Ithaca is kind of an impressive traffic jam. And so, if everyone just is continuing to drive themselves in their own vehicle, what we tend to call the single occupancy vehicle syndrome, it's not really a long-term solution, because I don't think we really want to widen our roads. We don't want to add more lanes. There's too many other things that we can do with that space, I think, that really make the community stronger and more engaged, et cetera, than build more lanes for traffic. So yeah, we do need to look at the active modes, walking and biking. We need to look at shared modes. And, right now, those shared modes are primarily transit. Gadabout runs paratransit, and they'll have more than one rider on a trip. And then like Uber and Lyft, I guess there's not really like an Uber pool here locally, but friends or family can travel together in the same vehicle. But I think there is something that there's a lot of interest in locally, which is trying to see if we can do some kind of shared mode with smaller vehicles, some type of on-demand service that kind of bridges that gap between like a private TNC like Uber and Lyft or taxi and TCAT public transportation, something in the middle. And TCAT has been experimenting with this a little bit in the past couple of years, but it hasn't been in the downtown area. And so it's interesting to discuss, like, okay, who is this going to help? Can we try to get people out of cars, but at the same time, we don't want to diminish the transit that's already working. So TCAT routes that are already pretty effective, moving 15, 20, 30 people at a time, we would rather not impact those, because using smaller vehicles will just be more expensive if you take those 15 people and distribute them among 3 to 5 vehicles. Again, you're maybe not accomplishing the goals that you set out to accomplish.
Yeah, but I love what you guys tried with the on-demand service with one of your routes, and just how innovative and how much more accessible it can make the bus for people. You want to talk a little bit about that? Because I was really excited we were really excited to be partnering with you guys on that. And
yeah, we appreciate that Way to Go was a partner on that project. It was a NYSERDA funded project, and it is actually still operating in the Lansing Etna area on weekends. The grant is going to come to a close kind of by the end of May, and so at least for a period of time, we're not going to run that as on demand, but we are definitely interested in continuing discussions and trying to understand where on demand is appropriate in Tompkins County. Um, but the T-Connect project is interesting in that, we really set it up so that it would be kind of a first mile, last mile service, so that, it would connect to the Route 30 at the mall. And the Route 30 in general, kind of 7 days a week, has 15-minute service. So if you can catch a ride in a smaller on-demand vehicle and then get to a point where transfers are easy, that seemed like the best option. Because otherwise, then you get stuck bringing those vehicles all the way downtown or to Cornell or to shopping in the Southwest or wherever people want to go. And that increases the cost and decreases the total number of rides you're able to provide over the course of a day, and ultimately expensive service delivery models are difficult to maintain in the long term. So we really try to set up in a way where we could get good ridership. And we've seen that, we're able to, like, when the demand is there, we're able to provide 5 to 6 rides an hour, which for an on-demand service is good. You can look around nationally, and most on-demand are kind of getting between 3 and 5 is what I've seen in my research. So yeah, we've kind of proved that it can work here locally, and now I think we're kind of reassessing what's next. And I don't know if anyone who's listening has any thoughts on demand, if you've ridden that type of service somewhere else, or have any comments or questions on that.
And I just thought it was amazing that somebody could call a smaller bus to their door or a nearby location to then take them to a central point where they could jump on other fixed route buses. And I think so much of the future, especially in sustainability of transportation, is how do we increase that ridership on shared mobility, and then how in turn to make shared mobility even that much more accessible to people. So it'll be easy and it'll be fun. And it gives people something else to do than drive their car. They could be doing something else on a bus or in a carpool or a shared ride.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's kind of there's many components to it, but like two major components, right? Is that, first of all, you have to have the services out there on the street, different ways to travel, different modes. And then the second thing is you have to find ways where people can kind of plan their trips, hopefully on a daily basis, and be able to find out about all those modes on a daily basis. And that's something we're still working on here locally, but we definitely have held that up as kind of where we want to head. I think most people in transportation circles in the Ithaca area agree with that. Like, if you can get on an app or a website or even call into a call center and basically book a ride using TCAT, any on-demand service that exists, you can get information about car share, bike share, paratransit, any other modes that are compatible and part of the mix. So that it's like, hey, today I want to go do this. Let's see what's available, and it's right there in front of you, and you can make your decisions accordingly.
Yeah, you can build your transportation, and then you can pay for it all online. And we're definitely, as a community, aren't we, trying to work on this called mobility as a service?
Yeah, exactly.
I see Rebecca, which I think means there's a question.
Yeah, well, it's a question from me, and it's more theoretical or process focused. So, as I'm sure you know, one of the challenges that we face, particularly in sustainability, is grappling with this sort of disconnect between what people say they would do if something were available versus what they will actually do when that is available. So, it's that theory that, people will say something, but it's really the tracks in the grass that tell us where action really happens. And I think we see this a lot in transportation surveys and that sort of thing, where people say, oh, I would ride my bike more if it was safer or there were more bike lanes or something like that. So I'm curious, in your work, how do you balance that? Is this like trial and error where you try something out and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't? I mean, that's a lot of financial investment to make and time investment to make for something that we're really not sure is going to work. So how do you each handle that?
Don, would you like to go? I could speak to it too, but.
Sure, I'll jump in just from cooperative extension does, we primarily do education, so we don't necessarily focus on developing services. We try to work with those service providers to provide information in terms of what we understand are people's needs, what's the research, and then how do we do outreach and education and communication around those different services. So what I wanted to say is that we are in the midst of doing a countywide transportation equity needs assessment, which is understanding, to a large extent, not just what people say they want, but what are the particular barriers that people experience with transportation in trying to access, getting to food, getting to work, getting their kids to school or after school activities, getting to healthcare services. So what is in the way? What barriers are in the way? And then how do we develop our policies, our programs, and our transportation services to actually overcome those barriers? And part of that needs assessment will also be, yes, what modes would you try? What really works for you? We have to be aware that we do have a large amount of rural area in Tompkins County, and people want access, they want ease, they want affordability, and some of that is going to be a single occupancy vehicle. The question is, in those cases, maybe how do we make and incentivize electrification? How do we look at affordability of electric vehicles for those folks that's really going to be the mode that works for them? I think incentives can really work well, and incentives have to be paired with those services that make it easy. We also help to provide travel training. So in terms of helping people understand how to use certain transportation. I mean, many people don't ride the bus because they might be afraid of it, or how do they work? They don't understand how it works, but it's very easy. So how do we make it easier for people to know that they can just grab a bus or get online and see where the bus is in real time to be able to jump on? So all of that requires education as well. But again, it's also understanding what are the barriers and what are people's needs. And then I'll leave it to Matt to talk maybe more specifically about developing those services and testing those services.
Yeah, the question is a very good one, and behavioral stuff is complex, and I think our tactic this far has been, okay, we need to make the service out there understandable, convenient, and inexpensive, and try to make it attractive to folks. But even if you do that, people have their patterns. A lot of people see, if they own a vehicle, that's already kind of a sunk cost for them. I suppose maintenance and fuel are things that are related to the number of miles you put on your car. But a lot of people are already, they've already have sunk costs in terms of purchasing the vehicle or a lease, and like insurance, registration, etc. So they're very inclined to continue to use that. I think there's a couple ways. One is to really try to be able to reach people when they have changes in their lives. They may be more open to changing their behavior. Maybe that's when they change jobs. So making sure that a new employer provides them with good transportation options. If folks say lose a job or between jobs, and we can make a case that, hey, you can actually get to all the places you need to go using shared modes of transportation. And it's a lot cheaper than owning your car. Maybe for folks that can become a viable option, even if it's not permanent. I do want to speak to just, I think there's a lot to be said, and we have a long way to go to make all of the shared modes as attractive and convenient as possible. It's not by any means perfect. But there definitely is something to be said also for looking at both the carrot and the stick. And unfortunately, perhaps that's a bad metaphor, but by stick, I mean certain things that we want to disincentivize. We should try to look at how to disincentivize them. One example is parking. If you look at the impermeable surfaces in the city of Ithaca, it's actually fairly amazing. That I forget the percentage, but there's certain neighborhoods where it's well over 50%, and that speaks to how car dependent we are. That we need not only roads to drive the cars on, but like 3 or 4 different parking spaces per car citywide, so that those cars have places to park. One of the reasons that Cornell staff, students, and faculty ride TCAT so much is because Cornell has done a lot in terms of transportation demand management, and that involves making parking somewhat expensive. The free lots are on the periphery of campus, and there's buses people can take to the buildings that they're going to. If you want to park in central campus, it's going to cost you, and it's not insignificant. So that's what I'm referring to as the sticks. We need to look at how the cost and the supply of parking, and try to make it available for those who really do need to drive, but be careful to make it too cheap and too plentiful, because it does serve as an incentive to people to continue to drive. And I'll just say, like, in terms of, how do you design new services? Pilots are a great way to do that. I think you need to be open and transparent that you're experimenting, that a pilot is essentially an experiment. It may not go on forever. Otherwise, it's kind of unfair to the people who use the pilot and really bring it into their day-to-day life, because then at some point it may go away. However, there's a lot of, when you read about different service models, a lot of the more innovative ones start in larger cities where there's a lot of density. They tend not to be in rural areas. The lack of density in rural areas is very challenging to transportation planners. And so I think that the Ithaca area and Tompkins County kind of can serve a role of trying to identify good potential service delivery models elsewhere and test them out here locally, and see what we can do in more rural areas and areas that are less dense but well connected to our existing modes. And so that's kind of what we try to do with T-Connect, is not run it right downtown where we have density, where everything is walkable, bikeable, and there's a lot of bus routes. There's a lot of options for folks, but to kind of have it on the periphery where, besides driving, there's not a lot else. There's no sidewalks on rural roads. People can bike, but the distances are longer. And so, could this be another option for folks in those areas?
And I wanted to add another thing, which was, we're thinking more about how to engage youth, so that it's not necessarily you get to 16, 17, and you're thinking about, when do I get my first car? So it's introducing youth to this kind of shared transportation and incentivizing that as well, and giving them the tools. So we work with the Ithaca City School District to talk a lot about ride sharing, carpooling. It's been slowed up a bit with COVID, but thinking about it in terms of not just your friends, But in terms of, say, a whole team getting involved, a whole team and all the parent drivers getting involved and figuring out who lives in your area and how to arrange carpooling with them. So it becomes a natural way of getting people around. And then in terms of TCAT, Matt, I don't know if you want to talk about what you're thinking about with providing bus passes to youth.
Yeah, that's something that we just brought to the TCAT Board of Directors, and they passed it. And so it's basically a program where all youth 17 and under countywide will have free ridership privileges on TCAT going forward. We're calling the program Free Ride with a Y in Ride for Youth. It's a little cutesy, and I know, but we like it. And so there's a page on our website that tells more about it, but basically that'll be starting with our summer service, in just over a month, and we'll be working with school districts to distribute those passes. So yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we've seen is that college age folks, they're not necessarily buying a car as soon as they're eligible to do so. They're not necessarily bringing that car to Ithaca. That's great, but we also want to kind of make sure that our local youth have that opportunity to really explore their community and do so independently, and not have cost be a factor.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a good segue, talking about sort of different needs and challenges that different populations face. And it sounded like, Dawn, in your work with CCE in this needs assessment, it's kind of a two-way street with education. One, you're educating people, but also collecting information from the public to then inform policy making or other programmatic efforts in the county. So this program, the Power Lunch program, usually looks at, just strictly the city of Ithaca. But I think what we're talking about today is more holistically the county, which has very different geographic and economic landscape from the city. So I'm curious, how do you see needs and challenges differing between the city and the rest of the county, and how do you go about addressing those? I know you mentioned pilot programs. How does that work with having a dense city and then a more rural outlying towns and villages?
Yeah, I think it's we cannot give any audience short shrift, is what I would say, because there are such diverse needs. It's not as if we're dealing with just a highly populated urban area. We've got socioeconomic differences. You often find people moving outside of downtown Ithaca because housing can be expensive, to more rural areas, which can then necessitate getting a car, which is not necessarily the direction we want to see things going. We'd like to have people to be able to live where it works for them in terms of affordability, and give them options to get around transportation wise. So part of the needs assessment is focusing in particular on different audiences, which includes rural audiences. It also includes aging populations who might not be able to drive anymore, and isolation can be a huge issue for aging populations. We want to look at youth, as we were just talking about, because there are different demands and different needs from youth populations. Oftentimes you have lower income communities, if they're rural, that really struggle with barriers to transportation, which can keep them in a cycle of poverty if there isn't appropriate access to be able to get to work. So I think in terms of really doing some planning holistically for the county, it's really first taking an accounting of what are those barriers and what are their needs, and where do we find compatibility? Where can we find solutions for particular populations that work for them, but also that might work for a variety of people, and then do some strategies around particular modes that will work for a wide range. And then it's also going to be different targeting. So, targeting those that might live in this, the flats area, the downtown area, where people could more easily choose biking or walking, and making sure that that's safe for folks. And knowing that certain people who are commuting in and out of the county to a job might have to drive alone. It's being able to understand the different situations in the different contexts, and then how do we be most efficient with which modes for which populations.
Yeah, I think.
Matt.
Oh boy, I got some echoes. Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on with my microphone, but yeah, I would agree. I just one thing to just note, I'm sure everybody's aware, maybe this is kind of obvious, but in transportation in particular, we're really focused on connectivity. We're trying to connect places. And a lot of people have connections between the city and outlying areas. And so they're moving around all the time, and our objective is really to try to understand everything. We can't really ignore people who are driving in from more rural areas or outlying areas, because their cars are on city streets every day. And so we need to think really kind of holistically about how to provide options for everybody. I will say, though, that obviously there's an expense to some of those to rides that may occur on shared modes in rural areas, and I think I just want to make the connection between land use and transportation. Don was kind of making the connection between housing and transportation, but generally having nodal development in outlying areas is useful, because it reduces the number of kind of unique trips that you're trying to make on a daily basis, and allows you to aggregate more people onto one vehicle. And that's really how you build a shared mode that's effective. So I also see there's a question in the chat, which I'll jump on real quick. Are educational institutions in Ithaca like Cornell, I see Tompkins, Cortland Community College, Ithaca City School District subsidizing TCAT? Let's see. First of all, Cornell's in a bit of a different category. They're one of our financial underwriters, as is the city and the county. And that kind of comes from TCAT's unique history as the consolidated entity that came from a Cornell campus circulator system, Ithaca Transit that operated in the city, and TomTran that operated bus service in the county. So Cornell and the other entities do contribute to TCAT on an annual basis, but in addition, they also make a bulk purchase of passes for all Cornell affiliated members of their community for different levels of ridership privileges. And they do offer first year students at any level free rides on TCAT, which is a great way to get those students used to the system. Upper folks, in addition, in the following years, they do have to buy a pass. There is some subsidy of those passes, as at Ithaca College and TC3. These are not large dollar figures, though, at the other institutions, but students do have the ability to buy discounted semester-long passes on TCAT. Oh, okay. Large landlords subsidizing TCAT. No, not in the sense that we're receiving operational funds from landlords, no. What we have tried in the past few years to create a kind of a more concrete link between bus service and the development of large housing projects and the site plan review process that occurs at the city. And so that's been useful in that developers now understand that it's important for them to talk to TCAT early before the building is built, and they want a bus to come by it, that they should come talk to us about what bus line they're closest to, if a shelter or a bus stop makes sense, how can we locate it for maximal operational efficiency, those types of things. And a lot of developers are putting in shelters for us to serve. I would love to see some kind of subsidy on the part of the developers for their residents or their clients. And I think that's a great way, if you're renting several hundred units, if you could give your tenants a free bus pass, that it not only encourages them to ride transit, but it could also help you as a developer reduce the amount of parking you have to build and maintain, which is expensive. Maintaining a parking spot, I've read estimates that it can be like $1,000 a year. So that adds up fairly quickly.
We have one more question in the chat, and I'm gonna tweak it just a little bit, and this will be our last question of the Power Lunch. So the prompt that we use for 1,000 Conversations is: imagine it's 2030. We've achieved all of the goals set out in the Green New Deal. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it smell like? Who's around you? All that sort of stuff. So I want to give you a chance to do that. If you had all the money in the world and could make whatever policy changes you like and any programmatic changes you like, what does that look like in the county? And then I want to follow that up with, as a kid, I think a lot of us imagine flying cars and spaceships and that sort of thing. So, today, when you look at 2030 and sort of a dream world, how does that compare to what you envisioned as a kid with maybe flying cars and the Jetsons zooming around?
Yeah, they're different worlds, aren't they? Some of the movies that were made in the 80s have 2025 or 2030 where cars are flying and somehow not running into each other. There seem to be some sort of lanes or something like this. And it is interesting to think about, because just in terms of this asphalt point that Matt was just making, we spend a lot of money and there's a lot of fossil fuels in our roads. That said, we haven't even talked about the engineering of roads, and more in terms of the transportation. But what I see, and I see it from two different ways. In one way, I see it from what types of transportation services are we providing? And then I see it another way in terms of how does transportation play a role in all of our conversations, because it is so critical for human well-being overall in general, so that people can get to where they need to go, get to where they want to go, be able to, access healthy food, be able to see their friends, be able to get an education. And transportation plays such a huge role in that. So I would really like to see transportation be a part of those conversations. So yes, you join a sports team, and the question that you're asked is, and do you have transportation, or will you need transportation, so that no one's denied access to something because they don't have transportation. You go to the doctor and they make sure that you have transportation to get there and transportation to get home, because a lot of the health issues that emerge in this country are because people often can't get to health services, and we forget about those things. Economic development depends upon being able to access a job, not just one that's local and is available, but something that you might actually want to do, but might be at a larger distance where transportation doesn't show up as an issue. So that's what I think about in terms of just how our society responds. In terms of sustainability, electrification of our electric vehicles for those that are driving cars. It would be really great to have charging stations easy and accessible. I think home charging stations is going to become more critical, because cars are now able to, drive longer distances on a charge. How can we help people afford to charge their car and get a charging station, or a higher voltage charging in their home, how to make that accessible. And then how do we really diversify the modes? Seeing really, if you wanted to use multiple modes, you can just get online, you can plan a trip, as we were talking about earlier, without really ever having to step in and use your own car if you have it, that you can jump on a bus and then grab a bike or get on a smaller van to get exactly where you need to go, and it's electrified and it's easy and it's accessible and it's fun. Part of that is also, making space on the streets and making streets safe. We talk about complete streets, so you are able to safely walk and bike, get around easy on a bus. That sort of accessibility, and then the mindset of using multiple modes is what I see as a very successful future.
Great. Boy, again, I have the echo. All right, let's.
We don't hear it, Matt.
Oh, okay. It's just me. It's so distracting. All right, great. So as not to repeat, Donna, and I just want to say, the idea of having the option to be car free and have that be an attractive option for everyone would be, a goal for me in 2030. I think one of the things that is critical here is building partnerships. Partnerships are maybe as part of the process and methodology to getting to the ends, but I see them also as kind of an ends in themselves. And so to me, that means that, the transportation people that work in transportation have to have closer links with transportation vulnerable communities in Ithaca and the county to really understand what the needs are. And Dawn is taking great strides towards that with a needs assessment, but making those kind of into more permanent relationships and connections. I think we need to make sure that, the different providers of shared use, that we really have a seat at the table, or that, at local municipalities that fix roads, that spend money on transportation. A lot of those, highway or roads departments are very focused on car traffic. They're focused on car throughput. They're not necessarily focused on the shared use modes we're talking about. So trying to get to a place where the definition of a transportation system is much more is amplified and also integrated is important. And I would think, I would say the same about other large stakeholders, such as landlords, such as employers, such as businesses in the tourism industry that are attracting people to the community, that they all realize, and that we've found ways to work together to try to support bringing those people onto shared modes, so that those are well used by 2030. And that all of the electric vehicles that we're going to be purchasing between now and then are accessible and distributed evenly across socioeconomic categories, that we really make this not something that people who can afford a Tesla have access to, and nothing more. So I think that's really critical. I know the city's been working hard on making sure that happens here locally, and I applaud those efforts.
I did lie. We have one more question, and I think we were crazy to think we could get through this without answering it. There is a lot of activism around, free TCAT. And I think this is a conversation that at least has been going on since I moved to Ithaca 5 years ago. So I want Matt to give you a chance to answer this. Is that really a possibility to make TCAT free? And if that is something that's possible, how would it get funded? What's the alternative?
All right, the difficult questions. All right, well, let's just start by clarifying. I see in the chat it indicates that, it's just a tenth of all revenue. Really, we take in between the Cornell bulk fare payment and all the other fare revenue that we bring in, and I'm talking pre-COVID. Since COVID hit, everything is kind of in flux, and it hasn't yet kind of balanced out. So it would be premature to really talk about how it works right now. But pre-COVID, all of those types of fare revenue were close to about a third of our operating expenses. So it is a fair amount of revenue that we're bringing in, but what we're collecting through the fare box per se is a lot less because, as I said, Cornell pays in a bulk way. So, I think, let's see, what would this take? I mean, I think it takes a couple things. First of all, by making youth passes free, hopefully we can collect both data and good stories, good anecdotes about how this improves people's actual quality of life. So we're working at the margins to try to provide that to certain parts of the population, and hopefully we can see that has positive consequences. So that's part of it. The other is, I think really trying to bring to the table all institutions, whether they be municipal, educational, private, and talk about what the benefits would be for the larger community. If Cornell is able to continue to pay for ridership from their community members, and we don't have to cover that amount of money, it does make it easier. And where would that money come from? We've considered like a local gas tax or fee for property owners, or I don't know if any of those are really what we want to do. I mean, gas taxes can be a little bit regressive. A lot of people, have to pay that if they don't have other means of transportation, or sometimes they use their vehicle for work, and that becomes regressive. So I think it's something where can we see if there are certain efficiencies we can make other places in the transportation system to try to free up some money? Can we identify stakeholders that can chip in just a little bit? Large employers. I think when you look around the country at other agencies or other communities that have fare-free transit, they tend to be either kind of resort or tourism destinations, or towns or cities dominated kind of by academic institutions. And we actually have both of those occurring here locally, which means that we wouldn't be such an outlier if we head in that direction. So I think it's about really starting to have those community conversations. Most people, when you ask them, will say, hey, we don't have anything in our budget that could go to cover that. But we have to think bigger. We have to think, kind of like as Luis has been thinking, and the folks at the city who are, yourself included, Rebecca, who are thinking about, how do we make big substantive change? That is the type of thinking cap we need to put on when we start to think about a problem like this.
Really appreciate you taking the time to answer that. I think that's a big ticket around here, is especially right now, is the free TCAT conversation. So I appreciate you taking some time. So we're running out of time here. I do want to give you both a brief opportunity to make any plugs for upcoming events or programs that people can participate in locally, and then we'll close out.
Sounds good. So this weekend is Streets Alive. So May 1st is Sunday. from 1 to 5 along Plain and Wood Streets. The streets will be closed down to car traffic, so people can walk, bike, rollerblade, wheelchair, ride in a wagon, which many kids do. Anything to get people out and just enjoying a big open street that doesn't have any cars or other motorized vehicles on it. And then there'll also be a lot of organizations that come out and have fun activities for kids and adults alike, get information. It's really just a fun event. And I also wanted to mention that Bike Walk Tompkins, which also does Streets Alive, is having a community bike sale and gear swap May 26th from 5 to 7 p.m. at Ithaca Farmers Market. And another program that I wanted to mention, we talked about the fact that Ithaca Car Share is there and you can kind of sign up to be a member. There's also Go Ithaca for commuting and trips downtown that people can sign up for a free membership and then get a number of perks and advantages, which includes a number of free TCAT bus passes. It includes a reduced rate for Ithaca Car Share membership. It includes some reduced parking passes for those times that you might need to drive in and park. Also that you start to give up again driving alone and trying different shared mobility. This is meant to really incentivize that. What am I missing, Matt?
All right. Well, a couple items that are transit focused. I think a lot of folks are aware that TCAT offers a Route 22, which is kind of the route to the parks in the summer only. We're bringing that back this year. By late May, the weekend Route 22 will be operating to the 3 local parks, so Teganic, Buttermilk, and Treman. And then, after the public schools get out for the summer, that'll operate on weekdays as well. And kind of related to that, I'll post this in the chat if anyone can see that, but I guess not. People are on YouTube. Anyway,
I can put it in there.
That would be awesome. Basically, I want to talk a little bit about this TCAT to Trails effort. There's now a map of the county with a lot of the great recreation areas that we're so lucky to have here. And it tells you what bus routes will get you there. And this was an effort really spearheaded by Myra Schulman, who is a board member at the Cayuga Trails Club, and a couple design students at Cornell. And I guess, really what I would love to see happen is that, folks who have a little time in the summer, maybe they're out of school, maybe they have some time on the weekend, it's a beautiful day. Please think about TCAT as a way to get to some of those fun places that you want to go, you want to recreate, you want to have a hike. The cool thing is when you go to one of the state parks in TCAT, you don't have to pay for parking. You just walk in, it's free. And there's so many other trails where you can go have an adventure. You can take the bus, you get off, you do the trail, and maybe you can walk out at a different location and make it a through hike and get on a different route for the ride home. So I just encourage folks to be creative, adventurous, and get out there and explore all the modes that we have to offer this summer.
That's so cool. What a pro tip. Accessing parks for free. Who knew? Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it. And we've gotten lots of thank yous in the chat. So I think people learned a lot today. And for folks joining us on YouTube, we will be back next week. Stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. But again, thank you, Matt and Dawn. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rebecca.